Earl Braddock pulled the olive-green John Deere mesh cap a little lower over his steel blue eyes, tugged the collar of his dark-tan Carhartt chore coat up against the cold March wind, and lifted the first of 4 60-pound burlap sacks of heritage soybean seed off the tailgate of his silver 2017 Chevy Silverado 2500. The sack was tied with hemp twine at the top and labeled in his late father's careful blue ink hand. Walter Braddock, Ottawa-line, 2026 harvest, pure. It was 9:12 on a cold Monday morning in late March 2027. Earl had backed the Silverado up to the receiving dock of the Gibson City Farmers Co-Op, exactly the way his father Walter Jr. had taught him in 1986, the way his grandfather Walter Sr. had taught Walter Jr. in 1958. Earl had been saving and selling Ottawa-line seed to local farmers for 12 years, ever since Walter passed in 2019, at $42 a bushel, well below the $68 a bushel that the major seed companies charged for their patented modern varieties. Earl had 800 bushels of saved Ottawa-line seed in his shed, waiting for spring planting at $42 a head, which worked out to a gross of $33,600 if the spring orders came in like they had every year since 2014. The Ottawa-line was a heritage variety. Walter Braddock had received the original seed stock from his father Walter Sr. in 1972, who had received it from a Douglas County farmer named Mose Wengerd in 1958. The seed had stayed in the Braddock shed, hand-saved every year, replanted every year, for 54 generations of soybean. The yield was modest at 48 bushels per acre, against the 62-bushel average of the modern patented varieties, but the protein content ran at 38.4% against the modern average of 34.2%. which made it valuable to the artisan tofu makers in Champaign and Bloomington, who paid a premium for non-GMO heritage protein. The 4 bushels Earl dropped at the co-op dock that Monday morning were the standard test sample required by Illinois Department of Agriculture Regulation 8 CCR 215.4 for any saved seed that would be sold across county lines. Earl had been dropping the same sample at the same dock every March for 12 years. Bradley Kosar, the new Ag Science Manager, was 34 years old. He had been on the job since October 2023. This was his first year handling the Braddock sample. If you like these stories, take a second and hit that subscribe button below. It helps small channels like this one keep telling the kind of stories nobody else will. Hit the bell, too. Now back to it. Bradley Kosar called Earl at 1:40 Thursday afternoon. Earl was on the JD 8R410 doing pre-plant tillage on the South 80. He shut the tractor off, climbed down, and took the call by the headland. "Mr. Braddock," Bradley said, "Bradley Kosar with the co-op. I have the results of your seed test back from the lab in Urbana." "And?" "Mr. Braddock, I am sorry to tell you that your sample failed the standard purity assay. Our chromatographic analysis identified 2 non-uniform genetic markers in your Ottawa-line lot. The Illinois Department of Agriculture flags any seed sample with non-uniform markers as potentially contaminated. Under Regulation 8 CCR 215.4, I am required to issue a destruction order on the parent lot." Earl stood at the headland for about 6 seconds without speaking. "How many bushels?" Earl asked. Your full saved lot of 800 bushels, Mr. Braddock, must be destroyed by April 15th, 2027. You may dispose of the seed by deep burying at a minimum of 36 inches, or by chemical denaturing with a 2.4% sodium hypochlorite solution at a minimum contact time of 48 hours. Documentation of destruction must be submitted to the co-op by April 22nd. Bradley, Earl said, my father saved that Ottawa-line for 47 years. My grandfather kept it before him. I have been dropping the same sample at your dock every March for 12 years. It has never once been flagged. Mr. Braddock, the older tests use cruder methods. Our new chromatographic analysis is more sensitive. The fact that previous samples were not flagged does not change the current finding. What are the two markers you found? The lab report identifies them as marker positions GMC217 and GMC218 on chromosome 14. Both are off-pattern from the registered Ottawa-line reference genome. Their presence at 0.7% and 0.4% of the seed lot, respectively, is above the 0.1% acceptable threshold for varietal purity. Bradley, has the lab considered that those markers might be a natural variant of the original variety? Mr. Braddock, our analysis is based on the registered reference genome. Any deviation from that reference is flagged as contamination by definition. By definition? Yes, sir. Earl stood at the headland for another 4 seconds. The April sun was high. The JD-8R sat behind him, with the cultivator chained on, idling at 950 revolutions per minute, smelling of warm diesel. Bradley, Earl said, I will appeal this finding. Where do I file the appeal? Mr. Braddock, the appeal process requires a retest using an alternative ASTA-certified lab at the seed owner's expense. Costs run between $1,800 and $2,400. The appeal must be filed within 14 days. However, the destruction order is not stayed during the appeal. So my seed gets destroyed before the appeal is even ruled on? Yes, sir. Under the regulation, the destruction order is final unless the appeal succeeds, at which point the co-op compensates the seed owner for the destroyed lot at the standard commodity rate. The standard commodity rate is $11.20 a bushel. I sell that seed at $42 a bushel. You're telling me even if I win the appeal, I lose 73% of the value of my saved seed? Mr. Braddock, the regulation is what it is. Thank you for the call, Bradley. I'll be in touch. Earl hung up. He stood at the headland with a cell phone in his hand for about 8 seconds. Then he climbed back on the 8R and finished the tillage pass to the property line. Earl drove the 4 miles home at 4:20 that afternoon, with the news sitting heavy on his chest like a wet tarp. He pulled into the gravel drive at 4:32, parked the silver Silverado beside the machine shed, and walked across the gravel to the back porch. The afternoon golden hour sun was already starting its drop toward the western Illinois horizon. Ruth was at the kitchen table with the farm books open and her reading glasses on the beaded chain pushed up on her head. Earl walked in and sat down across from her without saying a word. He pulled the olive green JD mesh cap off his head for the first time all day and laid it on the table beside the farm ledger. Ruth set her pen down. How bad? Bradley Kosar called, Earl told her. The co-op flagged Daddy's Ottawa-line as contaminated. They want all 800 bushels destroyed by April 15th. All 800? Ruth asked. All 800, Earl answered. By April 15th? By April 15th, Earl replied. Even if we appeal, we lose the seed? Ruth asked. And get back $11.20 a bushel instead of $42, Earl answered. Ruth set her pen down. Earl, I know. They cannot. They can, Ruth. The regulation lets them. That seed is half a century of Braddock work. More than half. Mose Wengerd had it before Daddy did, going back to 1948 in Douglas County. Ruth was quiet for about 6 seconds. Earl, who is still alive that knew Mose Wengerd? Earl looked up at her. Otto, he said. Otto Wengerd would be 78 now, Ruth told him. He'd remember his daddy's seed work better than anybody. He would. You should drive to Arthur tomorrow. Nathan came in for supper at 6:20 that evening. Earl told him the whole story over pork chops and mashed potatoes. They cannot do that, Dad, Nathan said. They can. The regulation lets them. That's Granddad's seed, going back to 1958. I know it, son. What's the appeal cost? $2,400 minimum. Up to $2,400 with the ASTA certified lab. And if you win, they pay $11.20 a bushel. Standard commodity rate. Means even if we win the appeal, we lose 73% of the value. Dad, Nathan said, we have to fight it anyway. We have to fight it smarter than that. Dale Voss called Earl at 7:40 that night. Word travels in Gibson City faster than the radio. Earl, I heard down at the diner that the co-op flagged your saved seed. Said Bradley Kosar found 2 contamination markers. Mm-hmm, Earl answered. Earl, I have been telling you for 8 years to switch to the patented varieties. Modern testing's more sensitive. Your daddy's old seed was bound to fail an honest test eventually. Goodbye, Dale, Earl said, and hung up. Ruth was on the porch with a thermos of coffee when Earl walked out. The April night sky was clear, and a thin peach band still glowed on the western horizon. Otto Wengerd, Ruth said quietly. Daddy used to drive over to his place every spring. He did. Earl, you should drive down there tomorrow. I'll leave at 7:20. Earl drove to Arthur, Illinois at 7:20 Friday morning. The drive was 38 miles southeast through Mahomet and into Douglas County. The Wengerd farm was 4 miles east of the main Amish settlement, on a gravel road off Route 133. Earl pulled into the gravel drive at 8:48. Daniel Wengerd, 52, was in the side yard hitching a draft horse to a plow. Mr. Wengerd, Earl said, stepping down from the Silverado. Daniel Wengerd? That's me, Daniel answered. Earl Braddock from Gibson City. I'm Walter Braddock, Jr.'s son. Daniel set the harness down and looked at Earl for a long second. Walter, Jr., who used to drive over here in his 78 4440 to buy seed from my father in the 80s and 90s. That's the one. Daddy's still living, out in the Doughty house. I came to ask him a question about the Ottawa-line. Daniel Wengerd nodded slowly. Come on back, Earl Braddock. Otto Wengerd was sitting on a hand-built oak porch swing on the front of the Doughty house, reading a brown leather-bound book in the morning sun. He was 78. Long white beard, dark suspenders over a faded blue chambray shirt, black straw hat hanging on a peg by the door, black brogan boots. He looked up as Earl approached and removed his reading spectacles slowly. Walter Braddock, Jr.'s boy, Otto said. It was not a question. Yes, sir. You drove a long way for a Friday morning, Earl Braddock. Sit down. Daniel will bring coffee. Quick interruption. If you've ever stood at the edge of your own field watching a 34-year-old with a master's degree tell you that 78 years of family seed is contaminated, hit that bell icon. We post 2 of these a week. Now back to it. Earl told Otto the whole story. The 800 bushels in the shed, the 4-bushel sample, Bradley Kosar's call, the 2 non-uniform markers at chromosome 14, positions GMC 217 and GMC 218. The destruction order, the appeal cost of $2,400, the compensation rate of $11.20 a bushel. Otto Wengerd listened without speaking for the entire 14 minutes Earl talked. When Earl was done, Otto set his coffee mug on the porch rail beside him, stood up slowly, and walked into the dawdy house. He returned 4 minutes later carrying a 1962 edition of the Old Farmer's Almanac and a worn leather-bound logbook so old the spine had been restitched twice with heavy waxed thread. "Earl Braddock," Otto said, "what you just described to me is the Ottawa branch marker. My father Mose identified it in the 1958 growing season on 14 acres of Ottawa-line soybean we had planted south of the bee yard." Earl sat forward on the swing. "He identified it?" "He did," Otto answered. "He wrote about it for 7 pages in this logbook." Otto held up the brown leather book. 1958, August through October. Plus, he summarized it in his almanac notes for 1962, the year he started selling Ottawa-line seed to other Douglas County farmers. What did he say? He called it the Ottawa branch. Said it appears in approximately 1 of every 12,000 plants in the heritage Ottawa-line variety. He said it is not contamination. It is the natural seed line drift of the original 1948 Ottawa breeding stock from the USDA station at Ottawa, Illinois. Plant biologists call it a sport variant. My father called it the Lord's signature on the seed. "Otto," Earl said quietly, "is there written record? Anything I can take to Bradley Kosar?" Otto Wengerd opened the 1962 Old Farmer's Almanac to a page that had been marked with a strip of red wool yarn for 65 years. He turned the almanac so Earl could see. On the margin of page 184 was written in faded blue ink, in Mose Wengerd's careful hand, "Ottawa branch marker. Appears at 1 in 12,000 plants in Ottawa-line seed. Not contamination. Natural variant of original 1948 Ottawa breeding stock. Mose Wengerd, August 14th, 1962. "There's more in the logbook," Otto told him. "Field counts, sketches, even a pressed leaf specimen from 1958, if you want to see." "Otto, may I take photographs?" "You may take the almanac and the logbook themselves, Earl Braddock. Daniel will drive over to Gibson City next Saturday and pick them up. The Wengerd family has loaned these books to neighbors before. They come back." "Otto," Earl said, "I cannot let you loan me a 1962 almanac and a 1958 logbook without some kind of guarantee. Let me leave a $500 deposit." "Earl Braddock," Otto answered, "no man gives an Amish elder a deposit on a book about seed. A handshake is the only paper I need. Hold out your hand." Earl held out his hand. Otto Wengerd shook it firmly, calloused, thick-knuckled grip, the way a man shakes a hand he means to honor. "Now," Otto said, "Daniel will write me a list of which books left the porch on which date. The Wengerd family has loaned out roughly 14 logbooks and 22 almanacs to neighbors over the last 65 years. Every single one came back. The seed people respect their seed people." "Otto, Why did your father identify this marker in 1958? He counted its beans, Earl Braddock. He counted every plant in a 14-acre Ottawa-line trial that summer. 168,000 plants total at 12,000 per acre. He found 14 sport variants. He kept them separate, hand-bagged, and planted them out in 1959 to see what they bred true to. They bred true to the original Ottawa-line. Same protein, same yield, same maturity. Just a small genetic shift on chromosome 14 that didn't show up in the field at all. That's the Ottawa branch, Earl said. Daddy named it himself, Otto answered. Otto, you saved my saved seed. My father saved your saved seed in 1958, Otto told him. I just kept the books for 69 years. Earl sat on the porch swing with the 1962 Almanac open across his knees for about 16 minutes without saying a word. Otto Wengerd watched the morning sun move across the porch railing. Daniel Wengerd brought a second pot of coffee at 9:44. Mr. Wengerd, Earl said finally, Otto, I cannot thank you enough. Don't thank me, Earl. Thank my father. He wrote those pages 69 years ago so the Ottawa-line would not be lost. He wrote them for the next farmer who needed them. That's you. The Lord knows the Lord's business. Earl drove back to Gibson City at 11:12 Friday morning with Mose Wengerd's 1958 logbook and his 1962 Old Farmer's Almanac, wrapped in a soft blue cotton cloth and laid carefully on the passenger seat of the Silverado. Earl walked into the Gibson City Farmers Co-Op office at 2:38 that same afternoon and asked for Bradley Kosar. Bradley came out of the lab in his white lab coat over a navy polo, round wire-rimmed glasses pushed up on his nose. Mr. Braddock, Bradley said, I wasn't expecting you today. I have something to show you. Earl laid the 1962 Almanac on the counter and turned it open to page 184. He laid the 1958 logbook beside it, open to the August 14th, 1958 entry. 7 pages of Mose Wengerd's careful blue ink notes about the Ottawa branch marker, with a small pressed soybean leaf still glued to page 187 as a specimen reference. Bradley Kosar bent over the counter and read silently for about 11 minutes. He read the almanac margin first. Then he read the logbook entries. He turned the pages carefully with his soft pink fingers. Twice he pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up. Once he pulled out his phone and photographed a page. Mr. Braddock, Bradley said at last, these are remarkable documents. They are, Earl agreed. This is contemporaneous field documentation of the Ottawa branch variant from 1958, with photographic specimen evidence. Yes, sir. Mr. Braddock, the reference genome used by our chromatographic test does not account for the historical Ottawa-line breeding lineage. The test flags any deviation from the modern reference as contamination. But if the variant predates the modern reference, then by definition it is not contamination. It is the original. Bradley, Earl said, will you withdraw the destruction order? Bradley Kosar stood at the counter for about 6 seconds. He looked at the almanac. He looked at the logbook. He looked at Earl Braddock. I will withdraw the destruction order this afternoon, Mr. Braddock. I will also submit a written request to the Illinois Department of Agriculture that the Ottawa-line variant markers GMC 217 and GMC 218 be added to the heritage reference genome as natural sport variants of the registered Ottawa-line. I would like to attach copies of these documents to the request, with your permission and Mr. Wengerd's." "You have my permission," Earl said. "I will call Otto." "Mr. Braddock," Bradley said quietly, "I owe you an apology, and I owe Mr. Wengerd an apology. I am 34 years old. I have a master's degree in plant pathology. I have never been farther east in this state than Champaign. I did not know there was a 1958 logbook in a dowdy house outside Arthur, with a hand-drawn sketch of a sport variant of the Ottawa-line. I should have known. I am sorry." "Bradley," Earl told him, "you know now." Bradley Kosar nodded. He carefully wrapped both books back in the soft blue cotton cloth, handed them across the counter to Earl, and walked back into the lab. Earl drove home from Arthur with the books on the passenger seat at 12:30. Virgil Kemp pulled into Earl's drive at 1:20 that afternoon. Virgil had heard the news from Ruth on the phone at noon and drove the 6 miles over. "Earl," Virgil said, climbing down from his Ford F250, "show me the books." Earl carried the wrapped bundle into the kitchen and laid the 1962 Almanac and the 1958 logbook on the table. Virgil sat down, put on his reading glasses, and went through Mose Wengerd's notes, page by page, for 22 minutes without saying a word. "Earl," Virgil said quietly when he was done, "your daddy used to talk about Mose Wengerd at the shop. Said Mose was the best seed keeper in central Illinois. Said Mose could spot a sport variant at 40 paces in a 14-acre field. Daddy never told me that. Your daddy didn't talk about everything he knew, Earl." "No, sir, he did not." "Bradley Kosar is going to lift the order the moment he sees these books. There is no other answer he can give. I'm driving down to the co-op this afternoon, Virgil. I'd go with you, Earl, but I have a customer's 4640 in the shop at 2 o'clock. You stay with the 4640. I'll handle the co-op." "Earl," Virgil said, "when you sell that 800 bushels at $42 a head, cut me a check for $400 and we'll buy a new seed cleaning unit. The 1957 hand mill is past its time. Bauer Mill from Iowa runs about $4,800 new. Done." "Virgil!" Earl Braddock sold his 800 bushels of Ottawa-line heritage soybean seed at $42 a bushel that spring, exactly as he had every spring since 2014. The gross came to $33,600. He cut Otto Wengerd a check for $2,400 against the cost of the appeal that Earl had never needed to file, because Otto had handed him a 1962 Old Farmer's Almanac that did the appeal's job before it was even written. He also cut Virgil Kemp a check for $400 toward the new $4,800 Bauer seed cleaning mill, and bought $1,200 worth of new burlap seed sacks at $2.40 per sack to replace the oldest ones in the shed. Otto refused the check at first. Earl drove back to Arthur with Ruth the following Saturday and put the check in Daniel Wengerd's hand instead. "Daniel," Earl said, "your daddy did me a kindness. Take this for the household." Daniel Wengerd held the check. "I will tell him you tried to give it to him direct, Earl Braddock. Tell him. Earl's biggest seed buyer, a tofu maker in Champaign named Stan Goto, who paid premium price for the high-protein heritage Ottawa-line, called Earl at 3:20 the next Wednesday afternoon." "Earl Braddock," Stan said, "I heard about Bradley Kosar at the co-op. You all settled now? "Settled, Stan," Earl answered. "Good. I want to up my order this spring. I need 280 bushels at $58 a bushel for the artisan run." $58 a bushel, Earl said. "Stan, my regular price is $42. "Your regular price was $42 before I knew the Ottawa-line had 78 years of pedigree behind it," Stan told him. "After the co-op story, I made some phone calls to my distributor. We're paying heritage line growers $58 to $64 a bushel in 2027. Sign me up for 280 bushels at $58. That's a gross of $16,240 from one buyer." "It is. Stan, I appreciate the call. Earl, I should be calling you to apologize. I have been buying Ottawa-line from your family since 2014 at $42 a head, and I should have been paying more all along. Bradley Kosar accidentally did me a favor by trying to destroy your seed." Earl smiled into the receiver. "I'll have the 280 bushels on a truck to Champaign by April 22nd, Stan. Cashier's check on delivery." "Done, Earl. And Earl, thank Mr. Wengerd for the rest of us." "I will." The Ottawa-line variant markers GMC 217 and GMC 218 were officially added to the USDA Heritage Reference Genome for Ottawa-line soybeans in November of 2027. Bradley Kosar's name was on the application as the submitting analyst. Mose Wengerd's name, dead since 1976, was on the application as the original identifier of the variant in 1958, with proper citation of the 1962 Old Farmer's Almanac and the 1958 logbook. Some things are written in lab reports, some things are written in the margins of a 1962 almanac in a 78-year-old Amish man's careful blue ink hand. And once in a great while, the second kind beats the first kind because the man who wrote it was 69 years smarter than the algorithm that was trying to tell him he was wrong.